looking at a Negotiator's Dilemma rifle build. And while we've done a Negotiator's Dilemma rifle build in the past, with Diamondback and the unique Agonizing Bite talent, this time around, we're looking at the Whisper named rifle, in large part because it is based on the M16 variant, which has a 3-round burst firing mechanic in this game, which lends itself incredibly well to the Negotiator's Dilemma critical hit chance and critical hit damage hostile negotiators talent. For our specialization, this time around we've gone with the Gunner, primarily for the supply line talent, which generates 10% of our total ammo capacity every 60 seconds. On top of that, the Incessant talent granting 10% armor on kill, and the Emplacement talent giving 10% weapon handling while not moving after you've been motionless for 1 second are great benefits as well. For a primary weapon, we've already talked about it a little bit, but we've gone with the Whisper high-end rifle, which comes with the Perfectly Behind You talent, which amplifies weapon damage by 25% to enemies that are not targeting you. For that reason, you can see down there one of our skill choices is the Decoy. That is what I would recommend for this build, as it means that the attention of the enemies are pulled away from you, proccing the Perfectly Behind You talent. On top of that, as you'll see in the video later, the Whisper is based on the M16, which in this game has a 3-round burst firing mechanic, which pairs really well with the Negotiator's Dilemma unique talent that we'll get to in just a second. For a primary weapon, we've gone with the Sweet Dreams exotic shotgun, largely for the Sandman talent. Melee attacks instantly kill non-elite enemies. The cooldown for that is 15 seconds. So the secondary weapon choice here is just, if enemies get too close to you, you can use the Sweet Dreams to take them out. If they're not an elite enemy, if they are, you can still rely on that total base damage there to help take them down quickly. On top of which, if you've happened to tag them with the Negotiator's Dilemma, you can then also provide a significant amount of damage to any other marked enemies in combat. For a sidearm, we have the Orbit high-end pistol, which comes with Perfect Finisher. Swapping from this weapon within 10 seconds of killing an enemy grants 35% critical hit chance and 40% critical hit damage for 15 seconds. Given that we are maxed out at 60% critical hit chance, the real benefit of the Perfect Finisher talent in this case is that additional 40% critical hit damage. So this weapon is just a nice way to boost your critical hit damage if you can get a kill with your sidearm. For our mask, we have our first of 4 pieces of Negotiator's Dilemma, and do note we have gone with both the chest and the backpack here. We'll go ahead and talk about those all at once. So at 2 pieces, you get plus 15% critical hit chance. At 3 pieces, you get plus 20% critical hit damage. And then at 4 pieces, you unlock the Hostile Negotiations talent. Critical hits mark enemies for 20 seconds, up to 3 marks total. When you critically hit a marked enemy, all other marked enemies take 60% of the damage dealt. Whenever a marked enemy dies, gain plus 2% critical hit damage, stacking up to 20 times, or until combat ends. So with both the chest and the backpack talents, we actually get to mark up to 5 enemies, thanks to our chest talent. And when we critically hit a marked enemy, all other marked targets take 112% of the damage dealt, thanks to our backpack talent. On top of that, whenever a marked enemy dies, we're increasing our critical hit damage, thanks to that third paragraph there, up to a maximum of plus 40% critical hit damage. So between Perfect Finisher and the Hostile Negotiations talent, we could actually get up to 80% additional critical hit damage on top of whatever we're seeing from our stats provided by our weapon mods and our gear. Speaking of mods, Negotiator's Dilemma rolls with a weapon core natively. You're going to want to keep that on all of these pieces. And then on top of that, we've gone with critical hit damage and critical hit chance in the mod slot. So ordinarily with critical hit builds, we would recommend following the equation on screen to maximize your critical hit multiplier. But for Negotiator's Dilemma, because Hostile Negotiations relies on critical hits, what we would actually recommend doing is make sure you cap out your critical hit chance, which is set to 60% maximum, so that you can guarantee the highest probability of proccing Hostile Negotiations whenever you fire your weapon. So even if you give up a little bit of overall crit hit multiplier, if you're losing 1-2%, I would still recommend getting to that 60% cap so that this build functions at its highest probability. For a backpack, we have our second piece of Negotiator's Dilemma, unlocking that plus 15% critical hit chance, which, as we just talked about, is incredibly important for proccing Hostile Negotiations. On top of that, we have a weapon damage core, critical hit damage, and critical hit chance again in our mod slot. And the backpack does come with the talent Critical Measures, which increases hostile negotiation damage to an additional marked target, which increases hostile negotiations damage to additional marked enemies from 60% to 112%. So while overall you do the most damage to the enemy that you are firing on, because hostile negotiations only transfers damage when you get critical hits, when you do get critical hits, because of the Negotiator's Dilemma, Critical Measures, backpack talent, when you critically hit a marked enemy, all other marked enemies take 112% of the damage that you just dealt with that critical hit to the enemy that you're targeting. So this can be incredibly beneficial for when you're trying to take down tanky enemies with a lot of health. What you want to do is you want to mark that target, switch to a potentially easier target, and fire away at that easier target, because whenever you get a critical hit, 112% of that critical hit's damage will transfer to all marked enemies. And that really is just a subset strategy of how to use Negotiator's Dilemma. As you'll see in the video later, the best way to utilize Negotiator's Dilemma, especially with the chest piece, which raises that marked limit from 3 to 5, is to just spray around, mark all of the enemies possible, and then fire at whichever enemy is easiest to hit consistently to take them down and to take everyone else down in the battle space as well. For chest piece, we have our third piece of Negotiator's Dilemma, unlocking that plus 20% critical hit damage bonus. And then here again, we have weapon damage, critical hit damage, and critical hit chance. And the chest piece comes with the Target Rich Environment talent, which, as we've mentioned before, raises our mark count from 3 to 5, meaning that now we can mark up to 5 hostiles with the hostile negotiations mark. For gloves, we've gone with one piece of Zuidoka, which gives us plus 15% mag size. If you wanted a better pure bullet increase, you could go with Seska Veroba here, but I really do like the Zuidoka plus 15% mag size because it just means you're reloading less, you're firing more. And while it doesn't always make sense from a pure DPS standpoint, it is a really nice quality of life thing to have that larger mag size on your Whisper rifle. On top of that, the Eagle's Grasp gloves come with the unique plus 15% weapon handling attribute. And as always, when we put weapon handling on a build, I do want to mention weapon handling is a roll-up attribute, which includes stability, accuracy, reload speed, and weapon swap speed, all at a 1-to-1 ratio. So for 1% weapon handling, you get 1% of each of those 4 attributes, which, while it does not directly increase your DPS calculation, it does make it more likely that you will hit the target, and ultimately you can't do any damage if you're not hitting the enemies. For holster, we have our fourth and final piece of Negotiator's Dilemma, which unlocks the Hostile Negotiator's talent that we've talked to at length in this video. And then again, here we've gone with weapon damage and critical hit chance. As we mentioned, it is rather important to max out your critical hit chance cap at 60%, so make sure you're doing that here or elsewhere before you start building into just pure critical hit damage. And then for knee pads, we have our Fox's Prayer, plus 10% rifle damage as the brand set bonus. Works great with the Whisper. And then again, here we have weapon damage, critical hit damage, and then the unique damage to target out of cover here. And I will take a pause here to compare the Fox's Prayer knee pads to the other obvious selection, which would be a second piece of Zuidoka, which would give you plus 20% rifle damage. While that would also be a usable option on this build, if you do want to maximize your damage output on this build between Zuidoka or Fox's Prayer for your knee pads, Fox's Prayer is going to be the way to go. The damage to target out of cover attribute gets applied in a different place in the weapon damage calculation than rifle damage or even the weapon damage cores does. So even though you're getting 20% rifle damage versus 8% damage to target out of cover, at peak stacks, the Fox's Prayer knee pads is going to give you higher weapon damage output than a second piece of Zuidoka. And then last here we have our skills. I've gone with the Reviver Hive and the Holographic Distraction Decoy. The decoy here is really the only one I strongly recommend because of the Whisper Perfectly Behind You talent. Having enemies not target you significantly increases your weapon damage output. So I'd strongly recommend the decoy for that reason. The Reviver Hive is much more of a preferential choice. If If you wanted more distraction, you could go with either the turret or the drone. Both of those will only be tier 1, but they do still provide some level of distraction for enemies. You could also go with the blinder Firefly if you wanted to apply that status effect. Also another way to make sure enemies aren't targeting you. But if you like to run on the edge and you find yourself going down too often, the Reviver Hive is what I would offer here as a solution to that. And it's just a really nice thing to run on an all-red build because you are going to be rather squishy. And this is just a nice way to make sure you're not relying on your enemies or the NPC allies to get you up all the time. So with that, take this build out for a spin. As always, like and subscribe if you like this video and you want to see more of stuff like this. Please tell your friends about the channel so you can continue to help us grow. And as always, we will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Reinforcements incoming. believe I'm still alive.